Hello everyone, this is Sean, the underemployed philosopher from Reasoned Observations, here today to talk about virtual reality. Now, before we get to the actual tech, let's talk about the idea behind virtual reality for a second. Now, I, like most people I think, really got interested in virtual reality pretty much the first time the concept was presented to me. Which for me was really seriously starting about the year 2000 when I saw The Matrix for the first time. And The Matrix was the basic brain in a vat, or all-encompassing deceiver hypothesis that Descartes really brought largely to Western philosophy. The idea is that since the only way we're able to get information about the world around us is through our sense impressions, that sense impressions are translated into electrical impulses, so it could just be that we're hooked up to some sort of machine that is feeding us electrical impulses, simulating the sense impressions we would get from seeing the world around us, or smelling it, or feeling it, tasting it. You get the idea. And that's a very interesting idea. I mean, the idea that we might not be living in the real world, that maybe things in reality are completely different from what we think here. And it's really hard to disprove that idea. I thought maybe that Descartes could take care of it because he claimed to, but Descartes suddenly goes from knowing only for sure that the thought that he's having right then exists to then thinking, well, that thought has to be had by something, so as long as I'm thinking, then I am. I think, therefore I am. Then suddenly he knew for sure that God existed, that it was the Christian God, and that God had all of the properties assigned to the Christian God, and because of logical entailments from those properties, that there necessarily is no deception because God is benevolent, and if there was a benevolent God, then they would not create a world where everything isn't as it really is. Now, that should sound pretty stupid, because it is. And if you want to hear me beat on that particular dead horse for a little bit more, check out one of my older videos. I'll put the link in the description. It's kind of fun, and I had a lot more hair back then. Anyway, virtual technology. So, since this idea that you could live in a world that's made in computers came around, people working on computers have understandably wanted to see if we could do that. And there have been a few different approaches. Graphically, things like the Virtual Boy kind of fell flat, and only now are we really getting to the time where we could have immersive graphical technology that can fool our visual senses, at least, into thinking we're in the real world. But a lot of world building like that went on to affect more of the experiential side of things. Like Everquest, for example, old massively multiplayer online RPG that launched right around 1999, I think. And I played it back around 2002, so yeah, 2000 was apparently a very big virtual year for me. Anyway, Everquest made this virtual world that you lived in. Now, the graphics were late 90s quality stuff, and they weren't super immersive, but they were functional. What was cool was the lore, the interactions you had with people in the virtual world that you could see, and you talk to these people, and you'd work together or work against each other, as it was. And it didn't start off, the game didn't start off as being like a game. Like, it started off like you were suddenly plunged into this completely different universe. You had a little bit of food, a little bit of drink, because you had to eat and drink, because it's the real world, right? And a note saying to go to your guildmaster. No indication what a note, where the guildmaster was, where anything was. You had no map system, no map. And a book that didn't say what it really was for, and nearby you'd see somebody that had a similar name to the book, and you'd give them the book, and then you'd be pretty much screwed over for the rest of the game because then you couldn't do very important things. And there was nothing to tell you not to do that. Just like you can make mistakes early on in real life and really mess things up later on. But that was a more experiential kind of virtual world that they created. And now we're getting to the point where we can do both of these at the same time. Now, there's a number of different virtual reality systems out there on the market. This is the one I've got because it came free with my phone. This is the Samsung Gear VR powered by Oculus. And I plug the phone in and it does stuff. It's pretty cool. It's the first VR I've ever seen and it's blown my mind. It's a whole... You can look around with your head like you're in the real world. But you're not in the real world, you're in this little virtual world, and the graphics are pretty impressive. Just like in real life, you can stare at something and see the little details, like the grain in the wood and stuff like that. And there's a lot of potential here. Right now, my controls are very limited with it because I don't have the controller, but it's got a little touchpad on the side. I mean, that's really all you need for most of the things I've tried so far. Mainly because I wouldn't try something I couldn't enjoy. But the video on here, I mean, video games are obviously where you think the whole virtual reality thing's gonna go, but when you see the power of 360 immersive video, it can transport you someplace in our own world, and that's a very powerful idea. And there's a Google Maps like thing on here, that the first thing you learn how to do is to teleport, and it's just amazing that we live in times when that's a thing that happens. That we could talk about this kind of thing. And we can see it start right here. Now, the other more advanced virtual reality systems, the HTC Vive, the actual Oculus Rift itself, I don't really know anything about them because I am an underemployed philosopher and can't afford to spend thousands of dollars on super cool gaming things. But from what I've heard, the Oculus has been something of a letdown. And the HTC Vive looks really awesome. And I kind of hope that's how it's going, because HTC Vive, you set up an area and have controllers, and it's approaching the holodeck, which everybody wants the holodeck, right? And the idea that we can make this different world where we can all interact with each other on our own terms, that's kind of hopeful. I mean, given how crappy things have been going in our real world, that maybe if we can get things right on the virtual world, we can sort it out here too. Well, have a great evening. Thank you for watching. Check back again next time and we'll have some more reasoned observations. Have a great night.